So imagine you decide you are going to be completely dialed in today. You wake up, you go straight to the kitchen, and you make what basically every wellness blog and longevity influencer insists is the ultimate metabolic breakfast.
Oh, I know exactly where this is going.
Right. Let's say it is a massive bowl of steel-cut oats, a huge handful of blueberries, some walnuts, and maybe like a drizzle of raw honey.
Sounds perfect on paper.
Exactly. So you eat it, you head to work, and you just feel incredibly proactive. But then, exactly 45 minutes later, this total fog rolls in.
The inevitable crash.
Yeah, you get shaky. You are just staring at your laptop screen, but not actually comprehending the words. Your eyelids feel like they weigh 10 pounds each, and you are suddenly gripped by this primal, almost aggressive craving for a pastry.
Which is postprandial somnolence. It is this biological phenomenon that we have culturally just accepted as a normal part of having a morning.
Right, we just push through it.
Yeah, we blame it on not sleeping enough or, needing a second cup of coffee. We completely ignore the fact that a massive endocrine event just occurred in our bodies.
And, until very recently, ignoring it was really the only option. We just had to guess what was happening based on how we felt.
Because the internal data was completely invisible to us.
Right. But I was browsing this biohacking forum yesterday, and the top post was titled, "I ate this one food and my blood sugar crashed. Here's what the data showed."
Oh, wow. Yeah, that happens so often now.
It is wild. This user had posted a screenshot from the app connected to a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM, on their arm. And they hadn't eaten a box of donuts, right? They ate a bowl of grapes.
Just normal, everyday grapes.
Just grapes. But the graph on their screen showed their blood glucose literally launching vertically.
Oh.
And that triggered this massive, disproportionate insulin dump from their pancreas, which then just drove their blood sugar down into the basement.
It is a total roller coaster.
Yeah, and the data completely validated the intense physical exhaustion they were feeling. So today, we're doing a deep dive into this exact phenomenon.
It is such a crucial topic right now.
It really is. We are going to look at the revolution in diabetes and metabolic management through CGMs, mobile health apps, and on-device AI. We have a massive stack of recent clinical data, including meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials from 2024 and 2025.
The clinical data on digital health interventions right now is just staggering.
Yeah, and our mission today is to decode how tracking your internal biology in real time creates this behavioral feedback loop. We're going to figure out how it fundamentally rewires your lifestyle habits, and crucially, why just looking at that data actually isn't enough to sustain long-term health.
That is the most fascinating part, the psychological aspect.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this. Because whether you are actively managing a metabolic condition or you are just insanely curious about this booming trend of wearable tech, the ripple effects of this are huge. The era of generalized eat your vegetables advice is just completely being replaced by hyper-personalized data.
It is a total paradigm shift in medicine.
It is. I was reading through the newly published 2025 American Diabetes Association Standards of Care, and they have made a really radical shift.
They absolutely have.
Because historically, right, if you wanted a CGM, you basically had to be a type 1 diabetic, meaning your immune system had destroyed the beta cells in your pancreas, and you literally needed this device to calculate life-saving exogenous insulin doses.
Right, it was purely a survival and diagnostic tool.
Exactly. But the 2025 guidelines are now explicitly recommending CGMs for adults with type 2 diabetes who are not on insulin.
Which is huge.
It is. They are pushing a piece of advanced diagnostic hardware purely as a behavioral modification tool.
Yeah.
They just want to help people achieve glycemic goals through lifestyle adjustments.
And the clinical logic driving that shift is really rooted in the failure rates of traditional behavioral counseling.
Which we know are pretty dismal.
Yeah, because telling a patient to just eat better relies on delayed, abstract consequences. The human brain really struggles to connect that bowl of grapes eaten on a Tuesday morning with an elevated HbA1c test result, 3 months later.
Right, the gap is just too wide.
Exactly. But the continuous glucose monitor bridges that temporal gap instantly. It acts as this personalized translation device, turning totally abstract advice into an immediate biological reality.
Okay, I want to drill into the actual mechanism of how it does that, because it is crucial for understanding what we are actually looking at on these screens. The device isn't actually tapping into a vein, right?
No, not at all. It is measuring the fluid just under the skin.
The interstitial fluid, right.
Yep.
So there's an inherent lag between what is happening in your actual bloodstream and what the sensor reads.
There is, yeah. It is usually about a 5 to 15-minute delay because when you digest carbohydrates, they are broken down into glucose, which enters the bloodstream first.
Right.
Then, driven by concentration gradients, that glucose eventually diffuses from the capillaries out into the interstitial fluid.
Got it. So how does the sensor actually read it once it's there?
Well, the CGM uses a tiny little sensor filament that is coated with an enzyme called glucose oxidase. When the glucose in your fluid interacts with that enzyme, it actually creates a minute electrical current.
Wait, really?
Yeah, the monitor measures that specific current, which is directly proportional to the glucose concentration, and then it transmits it via Bluetooth to the app on your phone.
That is wild. So we are essentially turning a biochemical reaction into an electrical signal that instantly translates to a line graph on your phone.
Exactly, and the behavioral impact of seeing that line graph is just profound.
I bet. Actually, there's a mixed methods study evaluating CGM implementation in public primary care settings that looked at this.
Oh, the 2024 study.
Yeah. When they gave these monitors to patients who were just managing their diets, 87.5% of them reported that noticing exactly how specific food choices affected their blood glucose directly led them to modify their diets.
87.5% is an incredible compliance rate for a dietary intervention.
Right. Almost 9 out of 10 people actually change their habits just from seeing the data. And if we look closely at a 2025 study in the journal Diabetes, Obesity, and Metabolism, we see exactly why that personalized behavioral modification is so necessary.
Yes, the one food phenomenon.
Exactly. They tested various lifestyle interventions using CGMs, including the Mediterranean diet, which, has been canonized basically as the gold standard for metabolic health.
Right, doctors recommend it universally.
Yeah, so the expectation was this uniform flattening of glucose curves across the board for everyone on the diet. But instead, they found immense heterogeneity.
Meaning it was totally different for everybody.
Completely. A meal consisting of whole grains and legumes caused minimal glucose excursions in one participant, but then it launched another participant into severe hyperglycemia.
Which completely shatters the concept of a universally healthy food.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, if I eat a banana and my blood sugar is totally fine, but you eat the exact same banana and your blood sugar spikes to 180, calling the banana healthy is functionally useless.
Right, because nutrition just isn't one size fits all. We have to look at the host, not just the food.
So what exactly is dictating that personalized response? Why are we reacting so differently?
Well, the variables dictating it are vast. A lot of it comes down to the specific composition of your gut microbiome.
Like the bacteria in your stomach.
Exactly.
Right.
Which specific bacterial strains are present to ferment those complex carbohydrates, but it's also your cellular insulin sensitivity, your current sleep debt, and even your baseline cortisol levels.
Cortisol, meaning stress.
Yeah. Cortisol is a stress hormone, and it stimulates hepatic gluconeogenesis, which means your liver literally pumps out endogenous glucose into your blood.
So if you are highly stressed, your baseline glucose is already elevated before you even eat.
Exactly. And then that banana just pushes you over the edge. The CGM acts as the great translator of all these unseen complex variables.
Okay, let's bring this back to the user who posted about the grapes on the forum.
Yeah.
Because the data didn't just show a spike, right? It showed a massive crash afterward.
Right, the reactive hypoglycemia.
Yeah, and this ties directly into the randomized controlled trials, looking at how CGMs guide food choices. One specific RCT took a group of people and simply let them watch their data.
Just watch it and adjust.
Yeah, just adjust their food based on what the screen told them. And by doing that, they reduced their time above range from 55% down to 21%.
That is a massive clinical shift.
It is. And I want to contextualize what spending 55% of your day above range actually means biologically. Because it's not just, a number on a screen.
Yeah.
It basically means for more than half of your waking life, your blood is effectively toxic.
And toxic really is the chemically accurate term there.
Explain that, what is happening in the blood.
Well, when glucose concentrations remain highly elevated, you initiate a process called non-enzymatic glycation.
Okay.
Essentially, those excess glucose molecules crash into proteins and lipids in your bloodstream, and they bind to them haphazardly without any regulation from enzymes.
Just sticking to things they shouldn't be sticking to.
Exactly. And this literally damages the endothelial lining of your blood vessels. It creates what are called advanced glycation end products.
AGGs.
Right, appropriately acronymized as AGEs,
Yeah.
and these drive systemic inflammation, arterial stiffening, and ultimately the microvascular damage that causes things like neuropathy and retinopathy.
Wow. So dropping that exposure time from 55% to 21% just by swapping out the foods that trigger your specific biology is a massive reduction in physiological aging and damage.
It is profound.
Yeah.
And taking that a step further, that resulting crash the user experienced after eating the grapes is a direct consequence of that system misfire.
Right. The reactive hypoglycemia you mentioned.
Yeah. Because when blood glucose rises too rapidly, the beta cells in the pancreas panic, basically. They often overcompensate, releasing an exaggerated bolus of insulin.
Like hitting the brakes too hard.
Exactly. Insulin facilitates the uptake of glucose into the muscle and fat cells, but because the insulin release was so aggressive, it pulls way too much glucose out of the blood.
And then you crash.
Right. And the resulting crash triggers a counter-regulatory response, where your body releases adrenaline to bring the sugar back up.
Adrenaline.
Yeah, which is exactly why the user felt shaky, completely exhausted, and aggressively craved more sugar to fix the deficit.
It is just a brutal physiological roller coaster. And seeing it visualized completely breaks that cognitive dissonance we have around our diets.
You can't unsee the graph.
No, you can't. But I think it's really important to point out that watching the graph is only one part of the equation.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to shift into how the actual software infrastructure, like the apps connected to these devices, are acting as these digital scaffolds to drive long-term clinical outcomes.
Yes, the M-Health applications.
Right. Because looking at the meta-analyses of digital health interventions, or DHIs, the efficacy data is honestly stunning.
It really is. We are looking at a pooled analysis of 31 randomized controlled trials here, right?
Yep, encompassing over 5,000 participants.
And across totally diverse demographics, these digital interventions achieved a statistically significant pooled mean reduction in HbA1c of 0.37%.
Which is huge. But I think we need to define HbA1c deeply here, rather than just calling it an average blood sugar, because understanding the mechanism of the test explains why a 0.37% drop is so clinically meaningful.
Right. So HbA1c, or glycated hemoglobin, measures the actual percentage of hemoglobin proteins in your red blood cells that have become coated with glucose.
Like the glycation we were just talking about.
Exactly. And because a red blood cell has a lifespan of roughly 120 days before it is recycled by your spleen, checking the percentage of glycated hemoglobin gives us a highly accurate retrospective snapshot of your average blood glucose concentrations over the past 2 to 3 months.
It's basically a 3-month receipt of your diet.
Yes. And in the clinical world, dropping that number by just 0.3% to 0.5% is recognized as the threshold for significantly reducing long-term metabolic complications.
And the crazy thing is, some of the specific platforms absolutely shattered that average. Like the data on the MySugar app showed a 1.3% absolute reduction in estimated HbA1c over 6 months for their high-risk users.
1.3% is incredible.
Yeah. And there was a separate 6-month RCT with 72 participants who were not on insulin, where simply using the CGM and its app pushed their time in range from 46% up to 72%.
That's a massive jump.
Huge. They dropped their HbA1c by 1.3% and lost an average of 7 pounds. And they did this with almost zero medication changes in the first 3 months. The software literally was the drug.
Because it acts as a therapeutic intervention by fundamentally altering the decision-making environment. In behavioral psychology, this relies heavily on the concept of a dose-response relationship.
Meaning the more you use it, the better the result?
Exactly. One study actually showed each additional day of app usage equaled a 0.016-point decrease in HbA1c. The engagement is the medicine.
Okay, but here is where it gets really interesting. Because I was looking at the subgroup analyses of these digital interventions, and I fully expected the high-end, heavily gamified apps with intricate dashboards to completely crush the competition.
It seems like they would, right?
Totally. But the data shows something completely counterintuitive. The complex mobile applications drove a 0.24% drop in HbA1c. But simple, automated, SMS-based text messaging interventions drove a negative 0.48% drop.
They literally doubled the efficacy.
Yeah. I'm struggling to understand how a 1990s technology literally beat out a multi-million-dollar modern smartphone app. Are tech companies just over-engineering healthcare at this point?
Well, yes and no. This is a classic example of underestimating the impact of cognitive load in behavioral design.
Cognitive load.
Yeah, so if we apply the FOG behavior model, it states that behavior occurs when motivation, ability, and a prompt all converge at the exact same moment. The failure of complex apps in broad populations becomes obvious when you look at it through that lens. A complex app requires high motivation and high ability.
Because you have to do so much just to see the data.
Exactly. You have to unlock the phone, locate the app, wait for it to load, navigate the user interface, and then actively interpret a multivariable dashboard.
That is massive friction. Like, if I'm tired or stressed after work, I'm just not going to open the app. I want to look at it.
And that friction leads directly to app fatigue and high attrition rates in longitudinal studies. People just stop logging in.
Right.
An SMS text message, on the other hand, minimizes the required ability to near zero. It is an intrusive, low-barrier prompt.
Because it just pops up on your screen.
Right. It meets the patient exactly where they are. The screen lights up on your desk, and you read it without even unlocking the device. It bypasses all that cognitive resistance.
It's just a frictionless behavioral wedge.
Mm-hmm.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
We just established that cognitive friction causes app fatigue and leads to failure. But the current trend in metabolic health isn't just text messages, right? It's demanding someone attach a physical CGM to their arm, wear a smartwatch to track their steps, use a smart scale, log their macros.
It sounds like a lot.
It does. Isn't strapping on multiple biometric devices and syncing them across platforms creating a far more insurmountable physical and cognitive friction? Like, are we mistaking more features for better outcomes?
That is such a vital distinction to make, the difference between passive hardware and active software.
Okay, explain that.
Attaching a CGM or putting on a smartwatch involves a one-time frictional event, just putting it on. After that, the data collection is entirely passive. You don't do anything.
I see.
The friction that drives attrition is the daily active requirement to manually log data. When the passive hardware integrates seamlessly with a low-friction prompt like your watch just vibrating to tell you your glucose is rising and you should take a walk, it bypasses cognitive load entirely.
Oh, that actually brings up a brilliant statistic from sources. We see this concept called the upward spiral.
Yes, I love this concept.
It's so cool. When users got that low-friction prompt, say a simple alert that their blood sugar was trending upward after lunch, 47.5% of CGM users reported that they were significantly more likely to initiate physical activity in that exact moment.
Almost half of them.
Yeah. They wouldn't schedule a gym session for tomorrow. They would literally just stand up from their desk and take a 15-minute walk right then.
Yeah.
The data literally gets people off the couch.
Because the immediate data transforms physical activity from a chore associated with like a long-term abstract goal-like weight loss into an acute medical intervention.
It's an instant fix.
Exactly. When you take that 15-minute walk, muscle contraction requires ATP, energy. And to generate ATP, your skeletal muscle recruits GLUT4 transporters to the cell surface.
Okay.
These transporters pull glucose out of the bloodstream completely independently of insulin. So you literally watch the line on your graph flatten out in real time as you walk.
Wow. It's basically operant conditioning. You feel the immediate satisfaction of manipulating your own biology in real time.
It is incredibly rewarding for the brain.
But this reliance on the technology to prompt the behavior exposes a really dangerous vulnerability. Because the data shows a terrifying pitfall to this digital scaffolding. What happens when the trial ends, the app gets deleted, or the text messages just stop?
The clinical benefits just evaporate.
No.
Yeah. We have extensive longitudinal data from the Gluco remote monitoring platform that tracks post-intervention metrics. And within just 6 to 8 weeks of a patient stopping their active engagement with the app, the metabolic gains reverse rapidly.
So it happens fast.
Very fast.
Yeah.
Average blood glucose rises, time and range plummets, and hyperglycemic events surge right back up.
So what this all means for the average person is that knowing you're doing something wrong isn't enough to stop you from doing it unless you're basically forced to record it. The technology doesn't actually cure the bad habit, it just temporarily suppresses it while you're watching.
It really highlights the difference between scaffolding a behavior and structurally rewiring it internally.
Right.
There is a fascinating 2025 RCT with 158 participants that crystallized this exact problem perfectly. They divided participants into 2 cohorts, One group used only a CGM, just looking at it,
Right.
and the other group used a CGM paired with a Fitbit to explicitly track their physical activity.
So observation versus observation paired with an action tracker.
Precisely.
Hmm.
At the 3-month mark, both groups showed an identical, highly significant 1.5% drop in their HbA1c.
So they both did great initially.
Right. But the divergence between month 3 and month 6 was stark. The CGM-only group began backsliding, seeing their HbA1c actually rise by 0.4%.
Wow.
But the group using the CGM plus the Fitbit maintained their glycemic improvements entirely.
So why did the naked CGM fail? I mean, if they knew how to flatten the curve at month 3, why couldn't they keep doing it at month 6?
Well, the researchers noted a significant reduction in physical activity in the CGM-only group over time. And this is rooted in a neurobiological process called habituation, specifically related to alarm fatigue.
Alarm fatigue, okay.
Yeah, when you first see a massive glucose spike on your monitor, it triggers an amygdala response. It causes anxiety, which motivates you to act, to take a walk.
Because it's scary.
Exactly. But the human brain is incredibly efficient at conserving energy and adapting. If you see that spike every single day, the neural pathways habituate to the stimulus.
The novelty wears off.
Right. The dopamine response dulls, and the amygdala literally stops sounding the alarm.
It's like moving into an apartment next to a train station. The first week, the noise wakes you up in a panic every time. But 6 months later, your brain doesn't even register the train going by. You just sleep right through it.
That is a perfect analogy.
So if you see the red spike on your CGM enough times, without being forced to track the physical action required to fix it, your brain just says, yeah, we are spiking again, who cares?
Exactly. Observation without enforced action leads to desensitization. Monitoring without tracking action leads to backsliding. The digital tools act as a temporary scaffold, but they don't inherently retrain intrinsic behavior unless paired with action-oriented tracking.
Like the Fitbit.
Right. The Fitbit provided a secondary layer of accountability focused entirely on the solution, the physical movement, rather than just passively monitoring the problem.
Which means the developers of these technologies are basically in an arms race against human apathy. They have to figure out how to prevent data fatigue before the user tunes out.
And they're doing that by shifting the cognitive burden.
Right. To solve this problem of data fatigue, developers are taking the burden of interpretation off the human brain entirely and handing it over to artificial intelligence right inside our phones.
We are seeing a profound leap in the analytical capabilities of these mHealth apps. Instead of just displaying a graph and hoping the user interprets it correctly, developers are integrating localized, on-device AI.
And the sources reference a specific app for this, right?
Yeah, there is specific reference in our data to an app called Blood Sugar Diabetes Control that utilizes a statistical methodology known as a robust Z-score for anomaly detection.
Okay, let's explain the math there, because a traditional Z-score is something most people might vaguely remember from, like high school statistics.
Right, exactly.
A standard Z-score basically tells you how many standard deviations a data point is from the mean. But why does a biological app need a robust Z-score?
Well, a standard Z-score calculates the mean, the average, of all your data. The problem with biological data, like blood glucose, is that it is highly prone to extreme outliers.
Like cheat days.
Exactly. If you go to a wedding and eat 3 pieces of cake, your glucose will skyrocket. In a standard Z-score, that massive outlier skews the mean for your entire dataset, pulling your average artificially high.
And if the average is artificially high, the algorithm might fail to flag a moderately dangerous spike the next day because it now considers higher numbers normal.
Precisely. A few bad days completely corrupt your baseline.
So how does the robust version fix that?
A robust Z-score solves this by using the median instead of the mean, and the median absolute deviation instead of the standard deviation.
Okay.
It calculates the actual middle value of your historical data, which is completely immune to being skewed by a few extreme outliers.
If we map that algorithm onto biological data, it means the app isn't comparing you to a generic clinical textbook, and it isn't being tricked by your cheat days either. It actually learns your true, unique metabolic baseline.
Yes, it learns you.
So if your curve looks a certain way after a typical lunch, and today it deviates, the AI flags the anomaly based strictly on your personal biological history.
And it pairs that anomaly detection with predictive modeling in real time. The AI correlates your current glucose trajectory with your historical data to suggest specific, immediate meals or snacks.
So you're at a restaurant, your glucose is dropping, and instead of guessing what to do, your phone's AI suggests a specific snack that won't send you into a rebound spike.
Exactly. It might output a suggestion to consume exactly 15 grams of complex carbohydrates and 5 grams of fat right now to stabilize your unique body.
It sounds like we're moving from a car with a check engine light, which is stressful and
Oh.
vague, to a car with a built-in mechanic that calmly hands you the exact wrench you need.
That's a great way to put it. And crucially, all of this is an on-device local AI model, which is a massive game changer for patient privacy.
Edge computing.
Right. The data processing happens right on the silicon of your phone. It never hits a cloud server. It doesn't get sold to a health insurance broker.
Which is so important. When you are dealing with deeply intimate biological data, keeping the processing on the phone guarantees privacy. And that is the only way patients are actually going to trust the app.
And that trust is paramount, especially as we move towards systems that not only suggest actions, but actually execute them automatically.
Oh, right, the closed-loop systems.
Yes. This brings us to broader clinical trials, testing closed-loop insulin delivery systems, such as the CIRCUIT trial.
The CIRCUIT trial focused on highly vulnerable populations, right? Pregnant women with type 1 diabetes.
Yes. The glycemic control requirements during a type 1 diabetic pregnancy are extraordinarily rigid because volatility poses severe risks to fetal development.
The stakes are incredibly high.
Exactly. So the CIRCUIT trial tested a closed-loop system where the CGM communicates directly with an insulin pump via a control algorithm, fundamentally acting as an artificial pancreas.
I want to understand the engineering behind this. Because it's not just, if sugar is high, pump insulin. Biology is way too delayed for that.
Way too delayed.
If you wait until the sugar is high to administer insulin, by the time the insulin is absorbed subcutaneously and becomes active, the blood sugar has continued to climb, and then suddenly you have a massive amount of insulin hitting the system all at once, driving a severe crash.
You are describing the exact limitation of reactive algorithms. Closed-loop systems don't just react, they predict. They rely on proportional integral derivative, or PID, controllers combined with model predictive control.
PID controllers. Those are used in cruise control for cars, aren't they?
They are heavily used in industrial engineering, yes. In a biological context, the proportional aspect calculates how far the current glucose is from the target.
Okay.
The integral looks at the historical accumulation of past errors like, has the glucose been running slightly high for the last hour?
Got it.
And the derivative calculates the current rate of change. Is the glucose rising rapidly or slowly? By synthesizing these three variables, the algorithm predicts where the glucose will be in 30 minutes and micro-adjusts the delivery of insulin before the spike or crash even occurs.
It is literally predicting the future of your bloodstream.
It is.
Which means the patient goes from constantly reacting to alarms, trying to manually calculate insulin to carb ratios while dealing with the stress of a pregnancy, to entirely outsourcing the cognitive burden of their disease to a microprocessor.
It is the absolute pinnacle of the digital scaffold we discussed earlier. And the success of trials like CIRCUIT really demonstrates the definitive trajectory toward entirely automated metabolic management.
And the beauty of handing you the right wrench, or fully automating the mechanic, is that it doesn't just fix the engine, it improves the whole vehicle.
Yes, the systemic effects.
Right. Let's look at how fixing blood sugar creates a cascading effect on entirely different diseases, like obesity, because this brings us to the comorbidity connection.
Type 2 diabetes and obesity are deeply, deeply intertwined. The clinical community increasingly recognizes these not as separate conditions, but as manifestations of the same underlying metabolic dysfunction.
I've heard the term diabesity used a lot lately.
Yes, exactly. And the meta-analysis of health interventions for individuals with concurrent type 2 diabetes and overweight or obesity prove that tracking glucose doesn't just manage diabetes, it significantly manages weight.
The numbers on that were really impressive. Over 6 to 12-month interventions, patients saw a mean weight reduction of 2.47 kilograms.
Which is roughly 5.4 pounds on average, basically just from tracking their glucose.
And beyond weight, these interventions significantly improve lipid profiles, lowering total cholesterol and LDL, the bad cholesterol associated with atherosclerosis.
We also have to look at the broader pharmacological landscape that mirrors these outcomes. When we examine major cardiovascular outcome trials for modern diabetes medications, we see the exact same systemic benefits.
And just a quick note for the listener, we are looking at this purely through the lens of physiological mechanisms. We're not endorsing any specific pharmaceuticals here.
Yeah.
But the data from trials like the MPA-REG outcome study and the Stardust trial are fascinating.
They really show that modern diabetes management fundamentally addresses broader cardiovascular and renal risks.
Okay, let's drill down into the mechanisms of those specific trials, because I think a lot of people are confused about how a diabetes drug ends up protecting your kidneys or your heart.
It's all connected.
Right. So the MPA-RAGE outcome trial looked at empagliflozin, which is an SGLT2 inhibitor. What exactly is SGLT2, and how does blocking it change the whole system?
SGLT2 stands for sodium glucose cotransporter-2. These are proteins located in your kidneys.
Okay.
Normally, your kidneys filter about 180 grams of glucose a day out of your blood, but the SGLT2 proteins reabsorb almost all of it right back into the bloodstream to conserve energy. And empagliflozin inhibits those proteins.
So it blocks the reabsorption.
Exactly. It essentially turns off the reabsorption mechanism, forcing the body to excrete excess glucose through the urine, a process called glycosuria.
So you are literally peeing out the calories and the sugar that would have otherwise spiked your blood and been stored as fat.
Yes. But the cardiovascular benefit comes from the hemodynamic shift. By excreting glucose, you are also excreting sodium, which acts as a mild diuretic.
Ah, so it lowers fluid volume.
Right. This lowers pressure in the kidneys and reduces overall blood pressure, significantly decreasing the workload on the heart. It fundamentally alters fluid dynamics.
That makes total sense. And then on the other side, you have the Stardust trial, which looked at liraglutide, a GLP-1 receptor agonist. GLP-1 is the hormone that basically everyone is talking about right now with the massive boom in weight loss drugs. How does GLP-1 work differently than the SGLT2 inhibitor?
GLP-1, or glucagon-like peptide-1, utilizes what's called the incretin effect. When you eat, your intestines naturally secrete GLP-1, which signals the pancreas to release insulin in anticipation of the glucose entering the blood.
Okay.
Liraglutide artificially amplifies this signal, but critically, it also delays gastric emptying, slowing down the rate at which food leaves the stomach, and binds to receptors in the brain to signal profound satiety.
So it forces you to feel full, stops the food from hitting your intestines quickly, and preloads the insulin response.
Exactly.
Both of these drugs are brilliant chemical hacks to control the glucose curve. But if we tie this back to the continuous glucose monitors, the CGM is essentially allowing you to achieve the behavioral equivalent of these pharmacological mechanisms.
That is the crucial takeaway.
Because by using the real-time data to stop the spikes from happening in the first place, you are drastically lowering the amount of insulin your body needs to produce organically.
And that reduction in basal insulin is the biochemical key to the entire comorbidity cascade. We have to look at how insulin resistance operates at a cellular level.
Right, because biology is an interconnected web.
Exactly. When you are constantly spiking your blood sugar, you are constantly flooding the system with insulin. Over time, the cells, particularly muscle and liver cells, become engorged with fat, specifically intramyocellular lipids and toxic byproducts.
And those toxic fats inside the cell literally block the signaling pathway,
Yeah.
right? They block the insulin receptor substrate.
Yes, IRS1. The insulin knocks on the door of the cell, but the intracellular fat blocks the signal from reaching the GLUT4 transporters, so the glucose can't get in.
And the pancreas responds by pumping out even more insulin, trying to force the door open. You end up with chronic hyperinsulinemia.
And because insulin is the primary fat storage hormone, as long as insulin levels are high, lipolysis, the breakdown of fat, is biochemically inhibited.
So you literally can't burn fat.
No. The enzyme hormone-sensitive lipase, which is required to release stored fat from your adipose tissue, is literally deactivated by the presence of insulin.
Which perfectly explains why generalized diet advice to just eat less and move more so often fails. If your dietary choices are constantly triggering insulin spikes, you are locking your body in storage mode. You cannot burn fat no matter what the caloric deficit is.
Exactly. But when you use the CGM to flatten your glucose spikes, you inherently reduce insulin resistance.
This is the upward spiral in action again.
Yes. You eliminate the specific foods that cause spikes, like the grapes, which lowers your overall insulin. Hormone-sensitive lipase is reactivated, and the body can finally access its fat stores for energy. Fixing the timing of your carbohydrate intake naturally leads to better sleep, more energy for activity, and consequent weight loss.
It is the ultimate domino effect. We have spent decades trying to treat obesity and cholesterol as separate monsters, when really they are just different heads of the same metabolic hydra.
And the clinical data strongly supports that paradigm shift, which really begs the question of whether CGM technology will eventually transition from being viewed primarily as a diabetes tool to a mainstream, universally adopted tool for proactive weight management and cardiovascular health.
Well, there is a study in the JNRR Hem Health Journal that explicitly tested this. They gave CGMs to free-living, entirely healthy individuals without any form of diabetes.
And what were the results?
The compliance and acceptability rates were staggering. More than 90% of the healthy participants found the devices easy to use and stated that the real-time data provided deeply relevant information they were eager to act on.
It reveals a profound cultural shift. Consumers are increasingly rejecting the paternalistic model of medicine where health is a black box only decipherable by a physician once a year.
Right. They want direct access to their biological telemetry. Because, to summarize the core realization here for you listening, your biology is uniquely yours. General health advice is a great starting point, but the future of wellness is discovering your personal data baseline.
The democratization of this data really empowers the individual to become the primary agent of their own metabolic health.
Exactly. So whether you are prepping for a doctor's appointment, looking to lose a few pounds, or just trying to avoid the afternoon energy crash, the tools to map your own metabolic responses are now literally at your fingertips.
You can visualize the spike, let the AI calculate the intervention, and track the movement required to flatten the curve. It is a remarkable convergence of biochemistry and machine learning.
It really is. But it does leave us with one final, slightly unnerving thought to explore on our own. Yeah. We are now successfully outsourcing the vigilance of our pancreas to wearable sensors and smartphone algorithms, right? If we can successfully close the loop on blood sugar, what other invisible bodily functions, hormones, neurotransmitters, cellular aging, will we soon be able to track, gamify, and control?
That is a wild thought.
Will we soon be tracking our real-time dopamine and serotonin fluctuations on our smartwatches, using localized AI to tell us exactly which activity will optimize our mood for the next 30 minutes? Are we stepping into an era where listening to our bodies means simply looking at our screens?
It is a frontier that will redefine human self-awareness, for better or worse.
It truly will. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the data. We hope you leave feeling a lot more informed about the mechanics of your own metabolism and perhaps a bit more skeptical the next time someone tries to sell you a universally perfect diet. Keep asking questions, keep tracking the data, and we will see you on the next deep dive.